Hi, thanks for watching BibleMountain.com. In this video we're going to read from Exodus 23 and learn that Christians must be different. If you step back and take a look at our society, Christians don't look a whole lot different than everyone else in our society. When you consider broken families, the pursuit of money, choices in entertainment, and the worship of sports, Christians look a lot like everyone else. In this video, we're going to read from Exodus 23 and learn that God values obedience, and sometimes obedience to God requires being different. We see in Exodus 23 that the Israelites were supposed to be different than the nations surrounding them. Likewise, we're going to read from Matthew 7 and Romans 12 and learn that we Christians are supposed to be different than the society that we live in. So let's get started in Exodus 23. We'll start at verse 13. The context of this is God has the Israelites at Mount Sinai. He is giving them the Mosaic Law. The Mosaic Law includes a culture, a criminal justice system, and religious practices. So let's get started at verse 13. Now concerning everything which I have said to you, be on your guard, and do not mention the name of other gods, nor let them be heard from your mouth. There is a command here, do not mention the name of other gods. This is the beginning of telling the Israelites to be different than the surrounding nations. Let's resume reading at verse 14. 3 times a year you shall celebrate a feast to me. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. For 7 days you are to eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you, at the appointed time in the month Abib, for in it you came out of Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. Also, you shall observe the feast of the harvest of the first fruits of your labors from what you sow in the field. Also, the feast of the ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in the fruit of your labors from the field. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord God. Here's another command. 3 times a year, the males are supposed to appear before the Lord. This was something else that they were supposed to do that would make them a little bit different from the surrounding nations. Let's keep reading at verse 18. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavened bread, nor is the fat of my feast to remain overnight until morning. You shall bring the choice first fruits of your soil into the house of the Lord your God. You are not to boil a young goat in the milk of its mother. Behold, I am going to send an angel before you to guard you along the way, and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Be on your guard before him, and obey his voice. Do not be rebellious toward him, for he will not pardon your transgression, since my name is in him. But if you truly obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies, and an adversary to your adversaries. Notice the word obey. It occurs twice. God told the Israelites that they had to obey. This shows that God values obedience. And obedience to God was one of the things the Israelites had to do to be different from the nations surrounding them. Let's keep reading of 23. For my angel will go before you and bring you into the land of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will completely destroy them. You shall not worship their gods nor serve them, nor do according to their deeds, but you shall utterly overthrow them and break their sacred pillars in pieces. Now notice it refers to the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. These were subgroups of the Canaanites. We see that from Genesis chapter 10, verse 15. Canaan became the father of Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgashite, and the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Sinite, and the Arvadite, and the Zemathite, and the Hamathite. Now in this map we see where Canaan was. It is in the area that is today the nation of Israel. Remember, the Israelites had spent several hundred years living in Egypt. God had delivered them from slavery in Egypt. He was taking them to the promised land. God is giving them the Mosaic Law at Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai was probably in this circle somewhere. And when they're done at Mount Sinai, then God is going to take them and bring them into the promised land, the land of Canaan. But God is telling the Israelites when they go into the land of Canaan, they're supposed to be different. And we see that here in verse 24, the command, you shall not worship their gods. The pronoun there refers to the Canaanites. There's a command, do not do according to their deeds. Let's keep reading at verse 25. But you shall serve Yahweh your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove sickness from your midst. There shall be no one miscarrying or barren in your land. I will fulfill the number of your days. I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion all the people among whom you come, and I will make all your enemies turn their backs to you. I will send hornets ahead of you so that they will drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites before you. I will not drive them out before you in a single year, that the land may not become desolate and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. I will drive them out before you little by little, until you become fruitful and take possession of the land. I will fix your boundary from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the river Euphrates, for I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you will drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them or with their gods. They shall not live in your land, because they will make you sin against me, for if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. Notice the promise here. God promised to fix their boundary from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the river Euphrates. If we look at this on a map, we see the wilderness down there towards the bottom. When the Israelites were at Mount Sinai, they were out in this wilderness. In the upper right, you see the Euphrates River, and God was promising that all that land in between would become a possession of the Israelites. There's another command here. God told the Israelites, you shall not make a covenant with the Canaanites or with their gods. God told them that the Canaanites were not supposed to live in the land with the Israelites. Notice the word because. God was about to tell the Israelites why the Canaanites were not supposed to live with them, and that was because the Canaanites would cause the Israelites to sin against God. Again, God values obedience. God wanted the Israelites to obey Him and do what He wanted, and not what the Canaanites were doing, and that required the Israelites to be different than the Canaanites. Now let's take a look at Matthew chapter 7, verse 13. This is Jesus speaking. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life, and there are few who find it. So notice the contrast here between the narrow gate and the wide gate. The narrow gate leads to life. The wide gate leads to destruction. So that tells us that in order to have life, we need to go through the narrow gate, which means we have to be different than the majority. The majority of people are going through the wide gate, but the wide gate leads to destruction. So if we want to go to life, we have to be in the minority and go through the narrow gate. Let's also read Romans 12, verse 2. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. So here there's a clear command. Do not be conformed to the world. We as Christians are supposed to be different than the culture that we live in, than the world that we live in. We are supposed to be different. But again, if you step back and take a look at our society, we see that Christians are a lot like everyone else in our society. We see that in the broken families, the pursuit of money, entertainment choices, and the worship of sports. We see in Exodus 23 that God values obedience, and in order to obey God, we have to be different than the society that we live in. The Israelites had to be different than the Canaanites. And we're told also in Matthew 7 and Romans 12 that we Christians need to be different than the culture and the world that we live in. If you haven't already joined my email list, please do so. First of all, it is free. By signing up, you'll get immediate access to all my free content. It will be delivered right to your email inbox. This is the best way to make sure you don't miss out on any of my content. In order to sign up, go to BibleMountain.com, click on follow, and there will be a place to enter your email address. Once again, thank you for watching BibleMountain.com.